You're listening to The Elephant Test. We're dedicated to the B2B marketing community and here to explore the practices, thoughts, and ideas of effective B2B marketing executives.
Hi, this is Sky Cassidy and Alicia Garvalia.
Hi, guys.
Thanks for joining us for the Elephant Test today. We're joined by Laura Patterson. She's the president of VisionEdge Marketing and is recognized as one of the pioneers and authorities in marketing performance management. I'm sure we're going to get into a lot of that and what marketing performance management is. Laura, good morning.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So,
Thanks for being here.
Yeah. You have a Bachelor of Communications and Business, and then you went on to get a Master's of Communications and Marketing from University of South Florida. How did you get from there to business marketing? Was that course kind of business focused or kind of what happened in that area?
That's a great question. Boy, I have to kind of go back and reel back in time. So I've always been more interested in business than in other pursuits. I dabbled a little bit in some nonprofit and education work, but there is something to be said about the workings of business and selling to other businesses. So I guess when you think about being in business, there's the option of marketing to the general public. And in my first job in financial services, there was a very large portion of my work was just with everyday people. But then as I became stronger in my skill set, there were a lot more challenges in some ways. I mean, they're both very challenging, but a lot more challenges associated with the consultative, complex sell of the B2B world. And I just found that to be very stimulating. We often talk in our company about B2B and B2C a little bit differently than maybe traditionally. One of my jobs in between my semesters in graduate school was selling office supplies. Those were in the days before, the Office Max and Office Depots and Staples of the world.
Like the TV show The Office. That's nobody knows what they sell there, but it's paper. They sell office supplies.
Exactly. Well, I sell paper out of my car, along with pens and pencils and rulers and staplers and all of those other things. And when you think about selling office supplies to businesses, it's really very much a B2C type of sell and marketing than it is B2B. So we think of, even though I'm selling to other businesses, so
yeah.
we
It's
think
kind of a door-to-door. You might as well be selling encyclopedias or something like that.
Exactly. You have to build relationships with the office manager, and you're basically helping them maintain their inventory, and it's all about being reliable and on-time delivery and good pricing and various things like that. But in the end, it is much more of a B2C sell. It's much more about the now. And it's also doesn't require a very deliberate decision or lots of decision makers. If they make the wrong choice in the color of a pen, it's fixable pretty easily.
Right. And they can make a quick decision. It can be an impulse buy, kind of like a consumer purchase. You started working with Motorola at some point. Was that before or after the office supplies?
It was after. So when I left graduate school, I ended up working for one of the companies. By the way, I used this is kind of give you maybe insight into me. The reason I took the office supply selling job was so that I could meet companies in the area. And so my first position out of graduate school was sales, marketing, and implementation for a software company in the durable medical equipment industry, which was essentially selling an application software, and this is going to really date me, guys, on a Wang 2200 to mom and pops who were going through the transformation of manual to automated processing of their, insurance and other systems.
A Wing 2200 is what precisely for the millennial in the room?
A Wang 2200. So Wang was one of the first providers of what was known as mid-sized computers that could sit on your desk, but were still pretty large. So they were not like a Cray, as big as a Cray, but not as small or plug-in as an Apple or today's PCs. And what you could do on it was probably nowhere near, given its size, what you could do today on your phone. But it was
right.
Wang was one of the forerunners in the age of computing. You probably remember other names similar to it, like Atari and others that have long since gone by the wayside.
So you guys were playing video games. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, yeah. Anyway.
Pong a lot. There's a lot of Pong going on in the office. Okay, I'm getting a picture here. Was this in Florida? I have to ask. Was this job in South Florida still?
It was. Yeah, so
okay.
I ended up in South Florida.
So you were in South Florida in the 80s?
I was in the South Florida, the very end of the 70s, early 80s, and working for this company, and Footloose and Fancy Free, and I had managed to secure some business and wins for this company in Texas. And I had a lot of customers in Dallas and Houston, and some very good friends in Texas, Austin, pursuing their PhD. So I had abandoned my pursuit of becoming a teacher and said, "Nope, I'm done with this education thing, and I'm gonna go to work and make some money."
So you got a taste of money, and you were like, I don't know if I want to be a teacher anymore. So one thing I have to touch on: you were in South Florida in the 80s. I just started watching the show Narcos, and when I saw you were in South Florida in the 80s, I was like, I have to ask her if she saw any crazy stuff going on down there in the 80s.
I was so buried. I'm sure there was, but I was so buried in my graduate work studies, and I was teaching.
She was a good girl, Scott.
I didn't have time.
You were playing a lot of Pong at work. There wasn't time for
I didn't have time one of the things that was alluring about being in South Florida was I was just a causeway away from the beach, and having come from Kirksville, Missouri, where the snow is higher, during the winter is higher than your car, that was really appealing. And I can probably count the number of times I made it to the beach in the 2 years I was in graduate school on one hand.
Yeah.
I live in LA, and I almost never go to the beach. And it's like, we have all the beaches that everybody sees on TV here, but then you got to actually go to them still. Like, you're busy.
Yeah, I was really busy, and graduate school was...
grad school's hard.
Graduate school was very... demanding, I think is a good word for it. But I'm glad I did it anyway. And so people always ask me, how did I get to Texas? So I'll give you the punchline to that. I was actually on one of those plane rides, and I met this man. His name is Carlton Braun. I don't know if he's still around or not. And he was bringing up the university, the Motorola University. He worked in Seguin, and he was heading to Chicago, so he was taking a flight out of Austin. I was taking a flight out of Austin. Back then, just like today, you couldn't get a direct flight from Austin to just about anywhere, so you had to go somewhere else. So we were on our way to
literally
Dallas.
today because of the floods, or...
No, that's Houston.
No, Austin. No, Austin just still is challenged to have a lot of direct flights, and that probably has something to do with the fact that we have two world-renowned airport hubs in the state, so I guess it's hard to have more than two.
They weren't going to do three. I said sorry.
But anyway, I met this man, and we were sitting next to each other, and we just got acquainted. And he said, we have a little startup part of our business in Austin, and call this guy. He literally gave me his name and number on a piece of paper. He said, call this guy. I think you'd be a great fit for our company. And,
how neat.
Yeah, it just goes to show you that the power of connections with people, right? It still really is about people doing business with people.
I hear too many stories like that. Too many stories where people are talking to somebody on an airplane, and I'm starting to think I need to do a lot more flying and talking to whoever's next to me. Were you in first class on the flight?
No, I was not in first class.
So
I always try to talk to the people next to me on airplane.
I try to sneak into first class just to talk to somebody important and maybe, have my big break.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that. I think important people sit everywhere on the plane.
That's definitely true.
But anyway, on one of my trips back into the area, I called and left this message for Frank. That was the man's name, Frank Adams. And eventually we connected, and that's how I ended up at Motorola. Carlton was right. They hired me.
So you'd always had kind of a desire to go into B2B. I feel like a lot of people really want to go into consumer because they see the billboards, and it just seems so much sexier. But in your mind, you'd always like B2B a little bit.
I did, and I had an opportunity to go to work for Procter & Gamble before graduate school. And it was my mentor in my undergraduate work who said to me, "You can always get a job. Go to graduate school. You're one of the ones I would really like to see go do that. There's always a job."
That's neat.
They told me you better get a job quick. Don't go to school anymore. You're not employable.
Well, yeah. Well, her feelings. That's a whole other conversation. We'll have to say that for another time on why she was feeling that way. But after having spent a very, very hard winter in Kirksville, the thought of going somewhere else cold. Well, come on now, think about it. Beach in graduate school or cold?
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And then you moved to Texas.
And now you're still in Texas, so you basically, once you got away from the cold, you never went back.
Yeah, I am not a fan of cold weather. I am definitely meant for south of the Mason-Dixon line.
It's funny that you moved to Texas after grad school. I went to Texas for grad school in communication and then ran away. So,
But still, Southern California.
I still want something warm. Yeah, I was pretty adamant about wanting to move somewhere warm.
Well, you picked a good place. Southern California is beautiful.
And very warm.
So one of the things we wanted...
B2B is my thing, and it's the thing of our company, too. When we founded VisionEdge Marketing a little over 18 years ago, so back in 1999, it was with a real focus on B2B.
Okay.
Nice. And your company, I've been looking at the, doing a little research here, going through you guys' Twitter feed. You guys put out a lot of content on, B2B marketing. Yes.
We try to be thoughtful about our content, and we try to have a carefully constructed calendar around what we're really trying to respond to and promote. But most of our content comes from our customers, questions and conversations with our customers. And just a little story about that. So when we started the company, and this is in 1999, we didn't have all the social media, and we didn't have all the wonderful, cool tools we have today. But we did have a little extra time. And one of the pardon?
So last century when you started the company.
You are so terrible, Sky.
It was true. It was the last century. But when we did, some of the people we were working with started sending in questions by email. They would just send in little questions, and then we would send an answer back. Just, friends of the family and people we were working with, so to speak, and customers we were building relationships with. And over the course of a few months, as we got busier and busier with customers, one day I couldn't respond to them one-on-one, so I kind of grouped them all together and created some topics and kind of disguised some of the important, things that would give away or reveal a company or a person. And I really was very apologetic. I said, I'm really, really sorry. I ran out of time this week to give everybody a personal answer. I hope you don't mind. But I put together this reply with, the answers to everyone's question, and I sent that out.
So you made like a regular FAQ kind of, and then eventually that just naturally transitioned into.
It was it wasn't really an FAQ. It was kind of like a Q&A. Because I hold that thought for a moment, because Sky, you're going to see how this evolved. So then nobody complained about that, and I thought, wow, that was so much easier than having to respond to everybody's every email. Next week, I did the same thing, and then the week after, I did the same thing, and then one day, I got this email that said, "Please add me to your tips list."
Right. And you thought, oh my God, I think I have a.
You're like, I have a tips list, huh? Yeah. Didn't know.
So, Barry, the person I co-founded the company, has long since retired. I was sitting. I said, "What tips list?" And so I emailed that person back. I said, "Exactly. I would be happy to do that. What tips list?"
I need to know where they're getting this information. What are they talking about? Yeah.
This wasn't somebody that I had gotten a question from, and so. That person sent a note back and said, "The thing you send out every week with all the tips in it." And so lo and behold, we created this thing called Tips. And up until very recently, we had a tips archive where all the questions that had come in, and they ranged everything about, can you find a piece of information about how big this market's going to be? I mean, every little thing we had in this database. We have since killed that because, first of all, it's mammoth, and second of all, it just got to be unruly. So that became Tips. And eventually Tips became our newsletter. And what we still do today is use those questions and queries for our content. So that's what feeds our blog and feeds our LinkedIn posts and drives our content are those questions that we get from our customers.
That's fantastic. I think it's always great to have your marketing or your content or even your products be driven by what your consumers are asking for, so that's good for you guys.
Yeah, and every now and then you get to write about something, that is passionate to me or and that's kind of fun. And every now and then I'll be in a conversation I think we have a post. I can't even remember. I'll have to ask Molly. I'll have to find it. We have a very recent post or have one coming out that is based on a coffee conversation around marketing. Oh, it's called Why is it marketing in the room? And that's what it's called. And so it's coming out, and it's based on having coffee with one of my colleagues who said they were invited. That there was a strategy meeting for the company, but marketing wasn't invited, and the response was marketing didn't need to be in the room.
I agree. So you mentioned that, I don't agree that marketing shouldn't be in the room. I agree. Wow, that's terrible. I'm really interested in reading that. But you mentioned there are things that you get to write that are you're really passionate about. What are those things that you're really passionate about? Aside, maybe also marketing not being in the room.
Well, besides that, yeah. I was really fortunate, back to Sky's point about going to work for Motorola. I really thought that was going to be a short stint. I remember telling my grandfather that I was leaving the company I was working for to go to work for Motorola, and he said, "What, the people who make the radios and TVs?" I said, "No, I'm going to go work in the semiconductor business." And he goes, "What's a semiconductor?"
Yeah, why not do a full conductor? That doesn't sound like a...
Anyway, so I was very fortunate. I stayed there 14 years.
Wow.
And it was an amazing culture, an amazing group of people. It was made huge implications to how I think, how I work, how we do everything in our company. And when I left Motorola, I left and went back into financial services, and from there back into software before starting up this company. And it was just a tremendous opportunity to work at Motorola in that time. And I had the privilege of working both in sales and marketing ops, marketing communication, product marketing, field marketing. Just tremendous amount of opportunity in that period of time. And so my passion, I began to realize that I really had a passion for the science side of marketing. I love digging into the data. I love doing process mapping around marketing. I love the dashboard work. I love the planning work and setting performance targets. Yeah, I enjoyed the marketing communications too, but what really drove me was digging into figuring out what would be the right target, right segment, right message. So it was very science side of marketing, and I really have a passion for that.
It sounds like you really have a full scope for all of the marketing and kind of even maybe bigger than that, full operations level, which is pretty neat.
I'd like to point out that she just pluralized marketing as well. That was impressive.
Well, and again, I think that had a lot to do. We wrote an article in Nimble earlier that ran, I think, the end of last month, earlier this month, and it was on really the return of integrated marketing. We had integrated marketing early in my career. We were all tasked. We had to think from an integrated perspective. Of course, we didn't have the prolific number of channels that we have today, but we still have more than people realize. Then there came a great deal of specialization, right, to marketing. And I think it's circling back around. I've started to see more titles for integrated marketing titles, and I've started to see more people in that role. And I think that's truly amazing. I think that marketing structures need to be revisited as we go through the transformations that marketing is experiencing. It's probably time to take a look at the organizational structure for most marketing organizations.
So 2 quick questions. One, when you were at Motorola, did they ever have a general meeting where they didn't include marketing?
Never.
Never, right. So Motorola is a big company. People listen in. Don't have general meetings and not include marketing. That's a big mistake.
Marketing is pretty important, guys. You can't put out products that you can't market.
Hopefully we're speaking to the choir here, because if you're listening to this podcast, you probably think marketing is kind of a big deal. Second question.
That there's a lot of marketers who are challenged, though, to your point, Sky and Alicia, that they feel like they're more at the caboose than at the engine.
Yeah.
Kind of an afterthought, yeah. But I think that leads to some of the things that you really specialize in. But first, I'm going to tease that, and I'm going to throw in a quick question here. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the proliferation of marketing just capabilities, kind of, and whether over your career, do you think it's gotten easier because of all the technologies and everything we have, or more difficult?
I think, I love to tell this little story, and I'm going to share it with you and your audience. When I was a small child, my father had a big workshop. He was was quite the handyman. And I loved having the tools in the workshop. And I had my own little, maybe you might remember these little red tool boxes for kids.
Yeah.
Does it remember that? And I remember...
I think I still have one, yeah.
Are you sure yours isn't for the children? I'm pretty sure yours is still the child size, Sky.
and one day my father took me to the hardware store with him. And you have to remember, back then, we didn't have the Lowe's and Home Depots we have today. They were local hardware shops. We were in the hardware shop. I mean, it was a big deal if you went to Sears for the Craftsman products, and we would just have just a local hardware shop. And back then, also, you kind of just let your kids roam. So I'm roaming around.
Buckets of nails that you buy by the pound and stuff like that.
Exactly.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, very different world, and with helpers all around. I mean, people all over the store, so he wasn't really worried about anything because there were people in the staffing, as opposed to today. If you walk into one of those big boxes, you could walk several aisles and never find a person who's working there.
They wear camouflage, so you can't find them on purpose.
I didn't realize that. That's helpful to know.
That's why you're not seeing them. Yeah.
Anyway, I find my father and I say to him, "Daddy, I have just found the neatest tool. You've got to see this tool." I was just fascinated. And what I had found was, I think it was called a bandsaw. And, yeah. And I said, we have got to have one of these.
One of the most dangerous tools you can play with, yeah.
Yes.
At least it wasn't a chainsaw.
Yeah.
And I remember my father looking at me and saying, "That is a really cool tool." I don't think he used the word cool, but that was a basic idea behind what he said. He says, "Here's the thing about tools. The thing about tools is that you need to know how to use the basic tool really well before you get a fancy tool. Because when you get a fancy tool," remember he's talking to a 4 or 5-year-old, "a fancy tool, and you don't know how to use the basic tool really well, then when you use the fancy tool, all that will happen is you can do more damage faster."
Meh.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, that's some life advice.
Yes, it is. That hasn't stopped me from collecting some really interesting tools along the way. But the point being, I think that's what has happened in some instances with marketing. We have a lot of people with a lot of fancy tools. I think the last thing I read, we wrote a LinkedIn article on why so many marketing technology implementations fail. The average company has 21 tools in their marketing stack. And we know there's thousands of them out there, right? Thousands of them. And we have a tendency, to chase shiny toys. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. And so if you don't know how to do you don't have the basic skills, whether that's basic skills for implementing a campaign or putting together an event or writing copy, if you don't have the basic tools, then having a fancy tool will only let you do more damage faster.
Right.
So I don't know.
So this came up once before. My personal, if I could have one marketing superpower, would be to know the use and capabilities of every marketing technology when it hit the market, as it was out there always. So, what if you had one marketing superpower? What would yours be?
Oh, well, first of all, I think that's a great superpower. It's a great superpower, Scott, to know every marketing tool. I think my superpower is I think I'm really good at getting marketing to be aligned to a business. Really, really, I have an amazing superpower to see those connections and make those connections happen.
I thought you were going to say which one you would have. You're saying, no, I already am a marketing superhero.
She is a superhero. She has a superpower. Get it straight.
I don't have to want one. I have
right.
one.
She's badass already, okay?
I've never got that answer. That's the best answer I've ever heard. What do you mean want one? I have one.
Right, I am a superhero.
I have a superpower. And I didn't realize what a gift that I had until I could run into and see some of the things I see.
You saw other people and you're like, wait, you can't fly? I thought everybody could. That's crazy. Only I can fly. Wow.
Exactly. I mean, that's sometimes I'm like, really? And I have learned that not to act shocked or amazed, because then that doesn't make the other person feel good. But
wow, you're
what do you mean you can't fly?
Poor you, boy.
I do think the other thing that I guess I was in that my thought there in that part of the conversation is about chasing shiny toys. I think one of the things that affects marketing's influence and credibility is our tendency to chase a shiny toy. Whether, and let's face it, we've been chasing shiny toys a long time. Whether we started chasing websites.
We think they're going to make it easier, though. We think like, oh, here's this thing that's going to make my life easier. They told me so. Like, I got to get this.
I'm pretty sure that's how every tool for marketing markets themselves ever.
Yeah.
well, let's just peel back history, right? We can remember when having a URL on a website was a pretty big deal. And we're still conquering websites today. And then websites have been around since the 90s. And email. I mean, just again, how being able to be effective at using email and all the things that go with email. Now we're chasing mobile. We've chased, gosh, just name all the things that social media. Gosh, I was thinking about
all the tools that come from social media. Yeah.
So mobile and social media, and before long we're going to be and now we're chasing ABM, which by the way is a repeat because we were doing ABM. That's just name something different.
Yeah. Well, I think now the technologies, that's one area where I look at the technologies and say they've actually enabled this. Because you can measure so much more marketing now that you can really you can measure it. And I think for you, I thought you were going to say you found a measuring tape in me because from what I know of you, you love measuring things. And, ABM, you got account-based sales before because you can measure sales. That's just the dollar amount that comes in the door. But now with marketing, we can measure everything. So it's like, oh, great, we can actually push this back. And a lot of companies I've heard are actually commissioning their marketing staff because now there's something to give commissions on. They can measure things backward.
Well, I think it's more than just measurement that the technology is allowed for ABM. I think it's also the personalization that really is that we have the ability to segment our lists. We have the ability to, I guess both those things, through the CRMs, we have the ability to really personalize. And I think that those two things. Sorry. Anyway, continue.
You were talking about the shiny tools.
Well, no, I'm just saying I think that you're exactly right. The tools that we have today are enabling ABM, or what we did in the 80s are enabling us to be able to do it in such a superior way. It is really remarkable. But the point I'm making is ABM is kind of a shiny toy, right? And that we are chasing. And what's on the horizon? AI, machine learning. I mean, we have so many things that the point I'm trying to make, I think, is that all those things are great. But the C-suite has some basic expectations of marketing, very, very basic expectations of marketing. And that is to create value for the organization, be able to move the business needles, whatever those needles are, to help the company be successful and produce results. So this goes back to the comment about measuring. It isn't so much about measuring, it's so much it is about producing results for the company and being able to show what we did to help the company create value for customers and create value for shareholders.
So I have a question for you on that. I kind of see in measurement, I kind of see two different sets, and while they do overlap, I think in my head and in a lot of marketers' heads, there's the set of numbers that you do show to the C-suite that's like, hey, I'm justifying my job, I'm justifying the position, I'm justifying all of the budget we have for this. And then there's also, and of course, hopefully that's taken from the other set of numbers, but then there's also this other set of numbers that is measuring what's going on in order for me to do the numbers that are helpful for me to see what's going on, which is maybe a little bit different than the numbers that the C-suite is seeing. They're just, obviously, we don't want to show the C-suite absolutely everything because they don't have time for that. But also I feel like there's a little bit of a difference. Like I talk to other, younger consultants and people who are really just starting in their jobs where their jobs are on the line as to whether or not they're performing. And so teaching other marketers how to prove that they're actually valuable is different than the numbers that we use to see what's going on. Do you want to talk about that? What do you think that's true?
So, first of all, before we do that, let's just be sure we're clear on terms. Mm-hmm. I think that it's easy to get some terms kind of used interchangeably. So I always like to differentiate between the terms data, measure, and metric.
Okay.
All right. So data is just pieces of information. A zip code is a piece of data. The color of someone's eyes is a piece of data. How tall someone is, how much money they earn, what kind of education they have. This is all data. Mm-hmm. And we use various ways of data whether that's data that is structured or data that is unstructured, to help give us insights into markets, into customers, whether that's persona development or customer buying journey mapping, customer experience. We use data to give us insights into what's going on with customers, products, markets, and competitors, right? And we use that data to help us make good, sound business decisions. Then there's measures, which are some kind of quality or quantity. They are a form of data. So how tall someone is a measure, right? In and of itself, it doesn't really tell us anything. It's just a piece of information, but it is measured, okay?
Okay.
A metric is something that will allow us to use it to determine whether or not we are in an acceptable range of performance.
Okay.
It's kind of like a benchmark.
It could be a benchmark, key performance indicators. There are metrics that aren't. Some metrics might not be a key KPI. All KPIs are a metric.
Okay.
And so what's important here, and we have a blog post on our website on understanding the differences in these terms and what they mean and the implications. So when we are in marketing, thinking big marketing, which is what I like to talk about, capital marketing that is strategic, we need measures and metrics and data so that we can help the organization make better decisions, to understand what is and isn't working, to be able to react to changes right out there in the marketplace or among customers, and mitigate risk. That's what we're trying to do with when we put together, for example, a marketing dashboard. And that dashboard should be reflective of what it is the company is trying to achieve, and then how marketing is contributing, hopefully is contributing, to what degree marketing is contributing to achieving those outcomes, right? It isn't so much about justifying what we do in marketing, because if we're doing our job well and we are connected and aligned to the business, then it isn't really about justifying, it's about enabling.
I completely agree. I feel like I'm super lucky in working here at Mountaintop Data that I don't feel like I have to prove myself constantly, but I do know that that's not necessarily, this guy's looking at me like, that's not true. No, he's joking. But I feel like that's not necessarily true, and that sometimes the alignment is a two-sided street. And so not only does marketing have to be aligned to the business, but the business also has to be willing and excited about the marketing. Does that make any sense? And so if they're not, and there's constantly this pushback, then maybe there is some need for that.
Meetings might just
right, exactly.
Say,
exactly.
Hey,
that's why marketing needs to be in the room.
Right, precisely. And or when you're very young in your career and you need those metrics to be able to say, hey, I am actually good at my job. You know,
maybe if your C-suite's leading you out of critical meetings, and then just saying you're not hitting these particular numbers, you might want to start looking for a new job.
Well,
maybe that's not the place you want to work at.
Yeah, it's not, again, I was really, really fortunate to work in a company, even though in some ways it was a product-centric company, right? I mean, it's an engineering company that we build cool stuff. If we build really cool stuff, they will come. That's the epitome, of a product-centric company. But we weren't,
right.
But when if you look back, most of the products we were building were to meet customer requirements. So even though we said it was product-centric, it was a really very much a customer market-centric company. But they missed the mark, obviously, because it is where it is today. But
they had a long, good run.
It was an amazing run, and we will save the conversation about, the trials and challenges all companies face, right, when they reach that place.
I would love to talk about that. There's something I want to talk about right now. I've been dying to pick your brain on this. I know that you are a bit of an expert in dashboards, and I want to know what are the numbers you can tell people, like, here's what you should definitely have on your dashboard, or here's how you should structure your dashboard. When it comes to marketing, B2B, KPIs, what do people need to have in there?
That is a great question, and we have slews and slews of dashboard articles, and I love constructing dashboards. I would say that next to my other superpower, I have I wouldn't call this a superpower, but I would say that I and this company, we are really superb dashboard architects. And
that's neat.
I think at the end of this, we're going to have a full picture of your superhero.
Yeah,
right.
I wouldn't call that a superpower.
Personality characteristics.
We're going to grab our graphic designer and we're going to have her make a rendering of you with a cape.
This is not a superpower.
Here's the characteristics. Yeah.
I wouldn't say this is a superpower. I think this is just a reflection of expertise and experience and passion. It's not a superpower, but it is something we thrive at doing.
Do you have like a top 3 or top 5 things
dashboards
that should be in every dashboard?
So marketing plans, because you can't have a good dashboard if you don't have a good marketing plan. You can't have a good marketing plan that isn't aligned and doesn't have performance targets and have the right measures. That's number 1. Number 2, you got to have good metrics chains. You can't get to a dashboard without a metrics chain. With that's sort of my superpower. That's where I talked about the alignment. That really is my superpower. And then using data and processes to help the organization be more effective and efficient, so marketing ops kinds of related things. And then lastly, our roots are all in data, right? Helping our customers make good decisions about customers, markets, products.
You've got all that stuff down, and now you have your marketing superhero vehicle.
We do.
You got to put a dashboard in.
So exactly.
What are the readouts going to be?
And we're very clear about what we don't do, Sky. So if anyone wants to talk about the shade of blue in their logo, please don't call me. I am not.
I'll cross that out. I'll cross that out.
I am not the right person for that. But anyway, and back to dashboards. So we get this question all the time: what should be on my dashboard? And people think it's some set of magic numbers. I will say that there's no magic numbers because it's going. They hate me to say it kind of depends, but here
I wanted magic numbers.
I know, but I will tell you.
Really hoping.
But I will tell you there are magic categories.
Uh-huh.
All right, so a good, solid marketing dashboard that you're going to be presenting to your leadership team. Once you have your plan and your performance targets aligned to the business outcomes, somehow or another has to capture these categories. So think about your dashboard in your vehicle. For those of us who have cars still, right? We have various things on our dashboard. We have the part that tells us how fast we're going, the part that tells us how much fuel we're consuming, something that tells us about the state of our engine, right? There's just different parts on the dashboard, right? Well, we need some similar kinds of categories on the marketing dashboard. So think about our job. Our job is to find, keep, and grow the value of customers. So we need categories around finding, keeping, and growing. So there's something. We are supposed to...
I'm going to quote you on that. I like that one. Find, keep, and grow the value of customers.
That belongs to Phil Kotler. Phil Kotler is the father of modern marketing, in my opinion. That's what he says is the responsibility of marketing. Create value by finding, keeping, and growing the value of customers. So 3 categories there. Now, we have to do something. I mean, customers buy something from us, right? We have a value proposition. So whether that's a product, a solution, a service, we need to have some category around our offer. It's the adoption rate of our offer, the usage rate, the innovation, right? And we don't exist in a vacuum. Most of us have competitors. So we need something around a category around how we're stacking up against the competition, whether that's category ownership or rate of growth in the category or rate of growth compared to the competitors or brand preference compared to competitors, right? It could be any number of things. So that's going to go in a category. So now we've done competition, we've done our offer, we've done find, keep, and grow around customers, and we need something around the money. I mean, we are managing the company and investing the company's money, and they want to know what they're getting for it. And so we need to have some kind of category around the money. So it's somewhere in there, and not just maybe money, but all resources, our productivity or operational kinds of things that need to be there, all systems firing.
So would that be like a sales directly from marketing or a marketing ROI? Or
That would be in the money. That would be in the money category.
Okay. Can you give some examples in the other categories of like specific numbers that people might be looking at that would show those?
Under the keeping customers, you might have something related to either customer churn, customer retention. You might have something related to, those would be the most common ones, clearly.
Maybe repeat business.
I was going to put that in grow. So repeat business in grow, I might put lifetime value, share of wallet. Might also put your customer advocacy, customer referral power rating, things like that. That might go there.
So no pressure, Laura, but I'm picturing everyone listening to this is standing in front of a whiteboard, like diagramming this out right now.
That's because he's watching me diagram it out right now.
If they're going to do that, they need to call us. We're not trying to give the secret sauce away here. So obviously around finding is, opportunity, number of opportunities generated, influence to the pipeline contribution. There could be any number of metrics there, right? Is that helpful?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Yeah.
Now, obviously it's going to be layered. There's going to be things underneath each one of those as you look at the various initiatives, campaigns, programs, whatever you're putting in place. So that's going to go in there. Back over on the money side, you're probably going to want to look at things like cost to acquire, cost to retain, cost to serve. If you're looking at sales, you might want to look at conversion rate, data, or velocity. Win rate would go under finding the win rate. So
your dashboards aren't like a race car with 3 dials. You're like an airplane cockpit. You really look at a lot of things.
I think it depends on the size of your company and where the maturity of the company, right? So we're working with a customer and we're building out a model, and one of the things that which I shared with them that's kind of become a motto. I hope they make a T-shirt. If they're listening, they'll know who they are. And when we were talking about, making a model of the universe, if you look at Aristotle's model of the universe, it's very simple. And if you look at NASA's model of the universe, it's become quite complex, right? So Aristotle first, NASA later.
Right. So start out with the Earth in the middle and then put your...
well, Aristotle actually said the sun was in the middle and we all rotate around.
Okay. I was hoping I got that right. Now I'm going to be embarrassed.
That's okay. But the point I was trying to make is, it's an iterative process. I mean, think back to what websites were like in the early days and what they were like today. So, everything will come in time, but maybe you just need to start somewhere. So I'll go back to Motorola for a quick moment. My first experience at making a real marketing dashboard came at Motorola, and we probably don't have time for me to tell the story that so many folks have heard about the conversation with Gary Daniels when he asked me to make the first marketing dashboard. But what he wanted was what's known as a 6-up chart. He wanted 6 charts all on a single, at that time, what we called foil, overhead piece of plastic, right, for presentation at ops reviews. That's what he wanted.
Like overhead projector back in the day.
Yes. I'm dating myself. Yes, where every room had a 3M projector in it, overhead projector. But the point being, we started small, and then as we got more sophisticated, the dashboard can become more sophisticated. I think it's important not to get too ahead of where the organization is is. So, just like any journey, start where
So one company might have a Cessna, kind of a dials and everything. Another might be a 747, but you have to have the right stuff for your size of company, kind of.
Yes, and we're maybe not even size, because I've seen some pretty sophisticated dashboards from small companies. It's just maybe maturity, data maturity, measurement maturity, process capabilities, the analytics capabilities. So I've seen some mid-size enterprises who are extraordinary at what they're able to do in a dashboard compared to some very large companies with immense resources and how much they're struggling.
Well, in some ways that makes sense. Okay, so I have a question for you. There are certain things that you're putting under Find, Keep, and Grow that I might put other places. So what I would love is maybe some definitions for Find, Keep, and Grow, because I feel like I'm swimming a little bit, and maybe, when I'm thinking through these categories, you're putting things in different categories than I would. So what is your definition
Laura,
for these?
do you want to maybe tease people with that? And you could put your definitions of Find, Keep, and Grow out on Twitter or something like that.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
I can do that, and I want to. While I am delighted to offer up my definition, I do think that there are some experts, well-known, well-regarded people who have been writing about this and teaching about this, and so I may include some of their definitions. And
that'd be great.
Who's in marketing who hasn't read a book by Kotler, really should find a way to get their hands on a copy of one of Kotler's books. I read his 1999 book, Kotler on Marketing, but there are others. But get one of his books, and it would be like trying to do strategy and never read Michael Porter, right?
So you read his book in 99, you said, I'm starting a company.
I read his book when it first came out. I'd already started the company, but I thought, wow, I really like the way he's framed this, and so that was helpful. I just read a book over the holidays last season that I was like, wow, I wish I'd read this, when it came out. And it was Gary Keller's The One Thing. Have you read that one?
I have not. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, it's essentially our whole approach. Sure. Yeah, it's pretty much the way we help our customers design their marketing plans. And we've used, our approach is very much reflected in what Simon does around the why, the golden circle. We built our whole approach.
In the middle of reading that one right now, yeah. It's crazy to read these books. I read one recently, and I said, why didn't I read this 10 years ago? It would have saved me so much heartache. Like, how come I didn't find this sooner? It's the whole, read everything you can thing cannot be overstated, I think.
Well, when I read these books, sometimes I'm thinking to myself, wow, I feel so validated.
Yeah. And then, but you also think, but I had to struggle through and figure this out myself.
And I wish I had been the one who wrote it.
Yeah.
Right.
I reinvented the wheel, and I could have just read this 15 years ago. And
yes,
start.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Although we were doing the work, the work that we do was happening in parallel with the work that Gary Keller was doing. So it just was kind of an affirmation. I was like,
you're I'm a genius. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Some of that validation where you say, I've been thinking this, and I see other people. I'm not crazy.
Right.
I'm not crazy. It's right. That's why I said
one of the things we like to ask people. Yeah, our recommendations for books. So it's great. You jump straight into it. Like, you got to read this, and then I always make sure if I haven't read them, I got to run out and do it.
Yeah. Do you have any?
What you can learn is amazing.
Do you have any other resources that you want to add on top of that? Obviously, your website is going to be a great resource, and we'll talk about that. Do you have any just last resources for our listeners?
So I like to grab a book, that I can use with customers. If people haven't read The Ocean Strategy, I do recommend that. If you read Porter first. And another book that I also like to recommend is Necessary Endings. Have you ever read that one?
No.
It's on strategy, and I really recommend that book. It's called Necessary Endings.
That sounds. I love that.
You're adding a lot to our reading list.
Yeah,
I'm going to stay away from all the social media, ABM, artificial intelligence books, because there are so many of those and lots of really good people writing about that.
And by the time you finish reading those, they're no longer relevant.
Right.
Yeah, well, I do think Necessary Endings, and that's a good point, Sky. I really like to find books that I think have legs, that aren't just about the current fad, right? Not what's in season,
here's what Google filter will do to you. Here's how to work against it. It's like they're going to change that every 12 hours, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also, on a personal side, the one thing kind of falls on the personal side, I also like Discover Your Strengths. If people are looking at that's a good book.
That's
awesome.
Are you
familiar with that one?
I am familiar with some of the writings and the concept, though I have not actually read it. But I think I've actually done some of the... Are there exercises in it? I feel like I've actually done some of the exercises out of it.
I don't remember about the exercises, but we have all our people take the Discover Your Strengths test as a way to help us understand where they really are strong and how to best utilize those strengths, and then what do we need to shore up? Who else needs to be on the team to make sure that they are successful?
Oh, neat. Is that the 4 quadrants test?
It's not. I think you might be thinking Myers-Briggs.
Nope, that's different.
There's so many tests.
Though I do
out there.
love Myers-Briggs.
We're going to take all these
anyway,
tests you recommend and put them in our show notes for sure.
For sure.
You seem to be an encyclopedia of what to read for marketing.
Yeah, and if you have any more that you want to put up, we will also add those later to the show notes as well. But I think we're out of time right now to talk about any more, unfortunately.
So we are really running out of time here. Laura, is there anything else that you want to throw out there for people before we wrap things up? Any other advice, anything like that, anything we haven't quite covered?
I have one last piece of advice for people listening, for marketers especially. We, as marketers, it's very easy for us to quickly succumb to speaking the language of marketing. And for those marketers who really want to step up their game and be taken seriously and build their influence and credibility, but in addition to understanding what to measure, how to measure all of that, speak the language of business. This would be my parting advice. Learn to speak in the language of business, because that's what the C-suite talks in.
Which is different than the language of marketing. All right.
Yeah. Excellent.
Thank
all right,
you.
everyone. We've been talking with Laura Patterson, president of VisionEdge Marketing. If you want to find her online, one place I really recommend, lots of good content on the VisionEdge Marketing Twitter feed, which is at Laura VEM, LAURA VEM for their Twitter. You can also find her on LinkedIn. I don't know, just put in Laura Patterson's name and you'll find her. She's at VisionEdge Marketing. I'm not going to read you the whole link.
It's Laura Patterson Vem.
Laura Patterson Vem. Okay, or there's that, yeah. And then also the VisionEdge Marketing website, VisionEdgeMarketing.com. One thing we haven't really thrown in here yet, Laura, can you tell people just a quick blurb about what you guys do at VisionEdge Marketing? And I'm sure it's what we've been talking about this whole time, but kind of an elevator pitch even for your company, what you guys do.
I like to say that we help companies use actionable insights to prove and improve business and marketing performance.
Awesome.
That is so succinct and so lovely. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for being on with us, Laura. Listeners, you can find the show notes and the books that Laura's been referencing and link to their blog all on our show notes on the elephanttest.com. There's no the. I like to add a the.
We talked to Facebook. They said take off the.
Right. And thanks for listening.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you again, Laura.
Thanks, Laura. Talk to you later.
Until next time.
A quick word from our sponsor.
Effective marketing starts with good data. At Mountaintop Data, we are experts at developing and maintaining high-quality marketing lists. With tens of millions of highly accurate records and more data being added daily, we're sure to have the contacts you need to be in front of. Learn more at mountaintopdata.com.
Hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Elephant Test. Check out the show notes at elephanttest.com. Thank you so much for listening from all of us here at The Elephant Test. Until next time.